everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 bringing to you another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And August 3rd, 1997 marks 28 years ago that history was made at SummerSlam 97 when Shawn Michaels accidentally cost The Undertaker the WWF title after inadvertently striking him with a steel chair, thus kicking off one of the most epic rivalries of all time. And for today's special edition, I am going to be discussing the success and failures of The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels feud from August 1997 to January 1998. It goes without saying that The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels are two of the most decorated, iconic, and respected wrestlers of all time. And the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, for me, were two guys who really helped carry the wrestling business during the mid 1990s when business was at its darkest and most lowest points. And this was during a time when everybody was leaving to go to WCW to make more money. But the two guys that really stuck by not only the business, but remained loyal to the fans through thick and thin were The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. And here you had was two guys who are both winners, both beloved and adored by fans, but they couldn't be any more different. They were both complete polar opposites of each other. Shawn Michaels was brash, loud, cocky, and at times very arrogant, but incredibly talented. And he was a guy who, if you saw his name on the card, you always knew you were going to get the best match of the show. And Shawn Michaels always prided himself in giving the fans their money's worth and giving them the best show possible. The Undertaker, on the other hand, was very quiet, very stoic, at times very demonic, and a man of few words. And he was someone who preferred to let his actions in the ring speak for themselves. And he was a very athletic guy for someone his size. And the things he was always able to do was unbelievable and incredibly jaw dropping. And The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had been in the company for almost the same length of time. Shawn Michaels debuted in 1988 as one half of the Rockers with Marty Jannetty, and The Undertaker made his iconic debut in 1990 at Survivor Series. But for the most part, The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels never crossed paths. They had their own careers, they had their own styles, their own personalities, but never ever touched once. The closest we ever got to an interaction between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels was in 1995 when they teamed up with Diesel in a six-man tag against British Bulldog, Owen Hart, and Yokozuna. And interestingly enough, Diesel and Shawn Michaels would both go on to play important key roles in The Undertaker's career as legendary opponents, respectively. But other than that, they never ever touched. But it wasn't until the summer of 1997 we would get our first ever Undertaker and Shawn Michaels interaction. So heading into SummerSlam 97, Undertaker was the WWF champion after winning the WWF title at WrestleMania 13 and was experiencing the role of his career. Shawn Michaels was coming back from an injury and was appointed as the special guest referee for the Undertaker versus Bret Hart WWF title match, with some very interesting stipulations. Bret Hart announced that if he was unable to defeat The Undertaker and win the WWF title, he would never ever set foot and wrestle in the United States ever again. Shawn Michaels, on the other hand, said that if I don't call the match down the middle, then I too will never ever step foot in the United States ever again. So a lot was riding on this epic SummerSlam main event. So during the closing moments of the title match, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart got into a massive argument, mainly over Bret Hart's use of the steel chair. Shawn Michaels, being the special referee, pulled up Bret Hart and questioned him about the use of the chair. Bret Hart ignored him. Shawn Michaels lost his cool, and the two got into each other's faces, and Bret Hart spat in Shawn Michaels' face. Shawn Michaels picked up the steel chair. Bret Hart quickly moved out of the way as Shawn Michaels struck The Undertaker inadvertently with a steel chair. The fans completely gasped in shock at what they had just seen, and Bret Hart aggressively ordered Shawn Michaels to count the three. And Shawn Michaels very reluctantly counted 1, 2, 3, thus costing The Undertaker the WWF title and crowning Bret Hart as the new WWF champion. Everyone booed at the finish. Shawn Michaels stood there with his jaw wide open, looking on in disbelief, almost saying to himself, "Oh my God, what have I just done?" And Shawn Michaels left the arena to a chorus of massive boos as Shawn Michaels looked on, looking very annoyed and disappointed with himself at his actions. The Undertaker sat up, looking very angry about what had just happened, and began stalking Shawn Michaels all the way back to the locker room. So the next night on Raw, after SummerSlam 97, Shawn Michaels was very unapologetic for his actions and blamed the entire company for putting him in a very difficult position. And this led to Shawn Michaels turning heel as he showed no remorse whatsoever for costing The Undertaker the WWF title. Undertaker later on came out in the show and declared that he was coming after Shawn Michaels and he was going to make him pay for his crimes. So the two guys who had been in the company longer than anybody else had finally locked horns. The rivalry had just begun. The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. And this would lead to not one, but not two, but three encounters between two of WWF's most iconic figures. So the following week, a tag match was scheduled between unlikely and reluctant partners. In one corner, we would have Shawn Michaels and Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus The Undertaker and Mankind. Now, this was an interesting dynamic because The Undertaker and Mankind had pretty much waged war with each other throughout all of 1996, all the way up to the early parts of 1997. So it was going to be very interesting to see how these two bitter rivals were going to coexist. And on the other side, we had the two massive egos of Shawn Michaels and Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Little did anyone realise that this would serve as the genesis for the formation of D-Generation X. And we were treated to our first ever interaction in the ring between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, for most of the tag match, would avoid The Undertaker's wrath at all costs, as Shawn Michaels picked up a steel chair and this time intentionally strike The Undertaker with a steel chair, busting him wide open, and thus drew blood from the dead man. Shawn Michaels had now cemented himself as one of the most top heels in the company, and there was no going back for Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was now officially the most hated man in the wrestling business, and the rivalry between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had now escalated into a very personal war, with The Undertaker making it his number one mission to destroy the Heartbreak Kid once and for all, while Shawn Michaels, on the other hand, made it his personal goal to anger and wind up The Undertaker as much as possible, while at the same time avoiding his wrath at all costs. So, the first ever singles match between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels was booked for In Your House Ground Zero. So, all throughout the build up, Shawn Michaels would constantly run away and avoid The Undertaker as Triple H, China, and Rick Rude would protect Shawn Michaels from The Undertaker. And this led to some very memorable moments because while Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were feuding with each other, in the background, Paul Bearer was gearing up to unveil The Undertaker's long thought dead brother, Kane. So at Ground Zero, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had a great match, but most of it was just Shawn Michaels taking lots of bumps and getting physically dominated by The Undertaker. And this led to a no contest due to interference from China, Triple H, and Rick Rude. And so it was decided that The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels would face again at In Your House, Bad Blood, in the first ever Hell in a Cell match with a very interesting stipulation. It was going to be for the number one contender spot, with the winner going on to face Bret Hart at Survivor Series 97. Now, we've had a lot of Hell in a Cell matches, a lot. But I have always been one of those people who has always said that the best Hell in a Cell match was the first one, Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed their first match at Ground Zero, but it was more of a brawl. You know, that sort of match you could have probably had it on Raw due to the fact that the match had no finish. But for me, I've always considered the Hell in a Cell match to be the true first ever Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels match because these two helped make Hell in a Cell mean something because their rivalry, although it only lasted a couple of months, it was about 2 months in this rivalry, they did a lot of good stuff and it was needed. A rivalry this personal shouldn't be just contained in a regular steel cage. This needed something bigger and more violent. And the Hell in a Cell was perfect. And for the next 30 plus minutes, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels delivered an excellent match. And it told a great story. Shawn Michaels was locked inside this massive cell with the evil, gigantic, demonic Undertaker. No help from his DX teammates. Shawn Michaels was going to have to go at this alone and try to survive the wrath of the dead man. And I loved it. It was a great match. Started off with traditional wrestling moves, lots of high flying spots, and then they worked their way outside the cell, all the way up to the top. Undertaker backdropped Shawn Michaels on top of the roof, kicking him off the side of the cell, with HBK landing on the Spanish announce table. Undertaker busted Shawn Michaels wide open after delivering snake eyes to the side of the cell like a human javelin. Undertaker beat the crap out of Shawn Michaels like he owed him money. Now, the interesting thing about The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels backstage, they weren't really fond of each other. And not in the sense that they hated each other, it was just the fact that they were two complete polar opposites. Undertaker was pretty much the locker room leader due to the fact that he was there the longest and he was the most respected by all of the fans and his peers. And he was the guy that everyone went to for advice. Shawn Michaels, on the other hand, was a handful. He was a nightmare to work with, and nobody liked Shawn Michaels. And Undertaker, while he respected Shawn Michaels as a wrestler and for his talent, he had no time for him as a person. And while it's interesting to have two guys who weren't necessarily good friends, whenever they got in the ring together, it was magic. And even though they were completely different in terms of size and weight, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker always went out there and had a great match. And sometimes you almost forget that The Undertaker was much bigger than Shawn Michaels because Shawn Michaels worked with a lot of different big guys, from Diesel to Psycho Sid to Vader, you name it. He worked with all of the giants, but he always had to work underneath them because of how big they were. With The Undertaker, he was not what you would call your traditional big guy. While he was a big guy in that sense, he was a very highly versatile wrestler. And Undertaker, by 1997, was proving to everybody that he could have a great match with the right opponent. And it started with Bret Hart in 1996, and it was taken to the next level with Shawn Michaels. So during the closing moments of the Hell in a Cell match, Undertaker picked up a steel chair and hit Shawn Michaels with the same weapon that struck him at SummerSlam 97. So it looked like The Undertaker was well on his way to beating Shawn Michaels and going on to face Bret Hart at Survivor Series 97. And then the lights went out, dreary organ music played, the whole arena bathed in dark red lights, an explosion went off, and out came Kane with Paul Bearer. Undertaker completely stopped what he was doing. Kane ripped off the cell door, stared down The Undertaker, brought back the lights, delivered a brutal tombstone to The Undertaker, thus allowing Shawn Michaels to pick up the victory. And Shawn Michaels would go on to face Bret Hart at Survivor Series 97 in one of the most controversial matches of all time, now referred to as the Montreal Screwjob. So, after almost 2 months of feuding, The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels would go their separate ways for a while. Undertaker would disappear from TV for a few weeks, while Shawn Michaels was riding high with his now officially christened faction, D-Generation X. So in December 97, it was announced that The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels would face each other one more time, this time with the WWF title on the line at the Royal Rumble in 1988 in a casket match, one of The Undertaker's specialties. So the casket match doesn't really get talked about enough because, the Hell in a Cell match at In Your House Bad Blood is obviously the most memorable. But I felt that the casket match was a good wrestling match. It really was. And this marked the third and final time for a while that The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels would face each other in the ring. And I've always looked at the casket match in 1988 as The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at their peak. Obviously, they were in 1997, but I've always felt by January 1998 they had reached a point where they were both at the top of their game. And it was a great match. I love the casket match. Obviously, the Hell in a Cell is my favourite, goes without saying. But I feel that the casket match deserves a bit more love because it's really good. It's a really fun match. And most people only talk about it for one thing. They talk about it mostly because of Shawn Michaels breaking his back. So during the opening moments of the match, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were going at it, doing their thing as always, and then Undertaker very aggressively backdropped Shawn Michaels onto the casket, and a piece of the wood of the side of the casket stabbed right in Shawn Michaels' back. Now, Shawn Michaels didn't look like he was hurt. He carried on for another 18 to 20 minutes longer and put on a hell of a wrestling match. And you wouldn't really know that he was injured because he performed at an amazing level, like he always does. He's the showstopper for a reason. He always wants to give the fans the best match possible. Whether he was a face or a heel, the results were always the same, with the same motive. Go out there and give the fans their money's worth. And Shawn Michaels did exactly that. And Shawn Michaels would go on to defeat The Undertaker again, thanks to assistance from Kane. Now, Kane, his involvement in The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels feud was quite interesting because three times Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had faced, and on two occasions, Kane cost Undertaker both of those matches. Now, leading up to the Royal Rumble 98, Shawn Michaels, just to wind up The Undertaker, announced to everyone that Kane had joined D-Generation X. Undertaker took very strong exception to that, and this led to a 3-on-1 beatdown from Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and China. And of course, as we all know, Kane came out and looked like Undertaker and Kane were on the same page. So it's interesting how, while Kane didn't really have a match with Shawn Michaels or had any interaction with him in that sense, he did play a bit of a key role in helping Shawn Michaels get those victories. So after Kane burned Undertaker's casket with him inside, Shawn Michaels would move on to face Stone Cold at WrestleMania 14. And of course, as we all know, The Undertaker went on to face Kane at WrestleMania 14 for the first time ever. And 1998 would pretty much be the last time we would see an Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels match. Undertaker would go on to have an even more epic career as his character continued to get darker and darker, and he would eventually form the Ministry of Darkness, and then he would evolve into the American Badass heading into the 2000s, and also played a key role in the huge success of the company's biggest boom period ever, referred to many as the Attitude Era, while Shawn Michaels would leave on a hiatus for 4 years with a broken back. But Shawn Michaels would occasionally return to WWF TV in various non wrestling roles. He would return as a guest commentator with JR and the King, and he would announce various shows on Raw. And he would also come back as the commissioner, and he would go on to join Vince McMahon's corporation as a heel authority figure. But during all of these little appearances, we never ever saw The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels cross paths with each other on TV, and they never had any form of interaction whatsoever. The closest thing to an interaction that we had between these two after their epic 90s rivalry was at Judgment Day 2000 when The Undertaker returned and debuted his American Badass gimmick at the closing moments of the Rock versus Triple H 60-minute Iron Man match when The Undertaker sped in on his motorcycle and cleaned house and took out Vince and Shane and all of DX. And after The Rock lost the WWF title, we saw Undertaker in his newly debuted biker gimmick stalking Shawn Michaels after he made the call to strip The Rock of the WWF title and award it to Triple H. And that was it. That was all we got. But it was only for like a few seconds. But The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels wouldn't really cross paths again until the mid 2000s, which will be covered for another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. So, in terms of the success and failures of the Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels feud from August 1997 to January 1998, I'm going to say this was a complete success. I really enjoyed this one a lot. This is and still remains one of my all time favorite wrestling rivalries. And even though the Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels feud didn't last as long as Austin versus McMahon or Undertaker versus Kane or The Rock versus Triple H, this feud helped give us some very epic moments and also helped play an important role in laying down the foundations for certain things that would go on to become the Attitude Era. It gave us the debut of Kane. It gave us the first ever Hell in a Cell match, which would go on to become one of the company's most important stipulations in wrestling history. It gave us three back to back excellent Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels singles matches. And it also gave us the formation of one of the greatest factions of all time, D-Generation X. So a lot of those things all came from this rivalry, The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. And when you look at The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels on paper, you could kind of look at this as kind of a mismatch because of the size differences and their styles and their personalities. But as I said earlier, anytime Undertaker and Shawn Michaels got in the ring together, it was magic. And anytime they interacted, it always got fans buzzing and it always got everyone excited to see what was going to happen between these two. And anytime these two locked up, they always delivered and they never disappointed, not once. And for those reasons alone, that's why it's one of my all time favorite wrestling rivalries. And you think about it, you know, the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels spent virtually all of the 90s not interacting with each other until 1997. So that's almost 6.5 years without them touching once. So I'm not entirely sure what the reasons were. Maybe it was the fact that they were busy doing other things. Maybe one of them or both of them didn't want to work with each other. Who knows really what the stories were. But when we finally did see these two lock up, as I said, it was magic. But they would go on to achieve legendary history with each other, which will be discussed in the next edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. So, anyway, that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels feud from August 97 to January 98? Did you enjoy it? What was your favourite match between these two? Was it their first one at In Your House Ground Zero, the first ever Hell in a Cell match at In Your House Bad Blood, or the casket match at the Royal Rumble 98? And what was your favourite moment? Was it when Shawn Michaels accidentally struck The Undertaker with a steel chair? Or was it when Shawn Michaels busted The Undertaker wide open on Raw during the end of their tag match? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series, where I will be back with part two of The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels feud, where I will be discussing the success and failures of their second rivalry from March 2009 to March 2010. So make sure you don't miss that. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.